Hey everybody, happy Wednesday. It's Nick Meador here. This is part three in the Let's Talk Values series that I'm sharing this week. Free videos talking about not only the core values that underlie everything that I do in my work with my coaching, workshops, retreats, and online courses, but also I'm hoping to, hey Diana, I'm hoping to also explain what I see as the important steps or aspects in a process of creating lasting change in our lives. In other words, creating effective, sustainable transformation to find out who we really are and then to put that into action in our lives. So before I get into the content, I want to share this video in a couple different places. So this is a good moment to pause and take some deep breaths. If you could just bear with me for a second. Keep taking those deep breaths. All right, I think we're good to go. Yeah, I haven't used Facebook Live very much, so I'm still figuring out some of the technical aspects of it. Before getting into today's topic of exploration, I did want to say a couple things about language. Actually, you may have already noticed, or you may have heard me say something about my preference to use everyday language when talking about spirituality, about spiritual practices, and the search of trying practices, finding out what works for us, and then to bring that into our day-to-day life, or at least into some consistent packet of tools that we can use when we go through all the things that come up in life. But in my own journey, I found so many cases where people were using either really obscure esoteric language. In other words, the concepts were just really, really complicated. Maybe they came from ancient traditions, so there had been some translation involved, and who knows if what that original idea or practice was in the the country or the part of the world that it originally came from. Who knows if it actually translated correctly into our what my my experience is, modern day English language. So there's that concern, or in other words, in my journey, I ran into a lot of places where it seemed like the language surrounding spiritual practice and the search for self-development and transformation, it's like the point would get lost, and the point started to seem like we needed to use certain spiritual words in order to be spiritual people. And to me, that's BS, to put it bluntly. But then there's this other danger that even in more modern groups that are talking about self-development, leadership training, and that kind of thing, in modern groups, there's also a lot of coining new terms, which everyone's allowed to be creative and come up with whatever words they want to use for what they're doing. But the danger is that if there's too much insider language being used, then it creates this air of exclusivity. Like whoever's using this language that somebody made up has something that, like, they're better or more spiritual, or they've done the work more, and if you don't join their club and use the terms that they've made up, then it's a way of creating some veneer of authority or expertise, and if you don't jump on their bandwagon, then then you're less than them, basically. So in what I do, I like to focus on the direct experience and how each individual has a unique experience. None of us can know exactly what another person is going through or what their experience or process has been. So because I'm aware that each of us has a little bit different experience of reality, I'm looking to well, first of all, express what I do, the ideas that I'm using in my workshops and retreats and coaching in as common and simple language as possible, so that it's accessible to more people, and also then when people get into a journey, or when people have a life-changing experience through my offerings, then I also want to encourage them to find language that more and more people can understand, so that it brings us all out more into the world, so that we're standing more openly and proudly in our power, in our identity, who we really are, instead of finding ourselves in some hidden pocket where we're only using terms or concepts that a limited number of people could understand, because then that to me contributes more to isolation and just does, and limits the impact that we can have in the world. So I'm going to take a water break and then transition. So maybe you caught my first two videos this week. On Monday, I talked about self-responsibility. On Tuesday, I talked about determination. Maybe you didn't see those ones yet. That's totally fine too. They're available to watch on the BS Free Spirituality page at any time. Today, part 3 is about exploration. And then on Thursday and Friday, I'll talk, what will I talk about? About purpose and expression. So exploration to me is about the fact that life is a journey, a quest, an adventure. We'll find allies and helpful groups along the way, and we'll also encounter what I would call tricksters or foes. Those are, terms inspired by world mythology. Ultimately, life is a solo mission that each one of us is living out on our own. That we are the only person that we are with from birth to death, and so as we go about our path of trying different spiritual practices or encountering groups, wanting to develop more conscious, intimate kind of connections with groups, I believe that any one school or system or group belief system is going to be insufficient as a guide to living life, partly because life and reality are infinitely complex, and any time that it comes into our human thought concepts, it becomes limited. And then also the other side of that is that life and our world and society are changing all the time. So even if we find, even in our individual life, if we find something that seems to work in our in what I would call a practice, whether it's meditation or yoga or something about our diet or nutrition, it's like not only is society changing all the time, but our bodies are changing all the time. And each little step along the way, we're discovering more and more about who we are, about the purpose of our lives, about the meaning of why we're here. So the exploration never ends, essentially. Hey, Emily. Yeah, to me, this kind of piggybacks on the topic from yesterday of determination, because so I talked a little bit about world mythology, about the idea of the monomyth, and how throughout human history there have been these stories of people walking outside the comfort zone, and when that happens, basically translating it into our modern experience, when we do step out of our comfort zone, out of the expectations and societal norms, that kind of thing, then we can either encounter border guards or gatekeepers outside of us, or we can also encounter them as voices inside of us, a voice that might say that something's impossible or not allowed for us, or we don't deserve to be moving outside of that comfort zone of expectations. So then I explained how determination comes in order to keep our resolve when we do hit a wall, or when we get stuck, to keep going. And so then the going part leads into exploration. Basically, in addition to running into symbolic border guards, the voices inside of us or outside that say, we shouldn't do that, or we should be following the rules. Then we could also, we will. I think that anyone who's on the path long enough of exploring spiritual self-development is going to find allies or helpers. These could be teachers, somebody who leads a spiritual practice. It could be somebody who has gone through a similar life-changing process before and has a personal story to share. I think there's something to be said also about the importance of community, of a group that has a shared sense of values, similar passions, and there's so to me this idea of exploration, of starting from a place of feeling like we don't have what we really need and want, or at least, and that's the thing, we're always going to be searching for more. We're always going to be on this journey, but at whatever point we notice that we're missing something or lacking something, that our needs or desires are not being met, then there's a decision to move out of whatever spot we're in and to seek out the figures that will support us, that will help us to get to the next step on our journey. So in the context of for instance, of a workshop that I lead, I like to, I definitely, my intuition usually leads me to stitch together different practices in a way that even in a 3-hour workshop could give somebody the sense that they've been on a journey, that midway through and at the end, we can kind of take a deep breath and reflect back and wonder, how did we get here? Like, what did we just, or that's just this thought that even when I'm leading them, sometimes I have this thought like, wow, that was kind of unexpected, and there were some challenges that came up, and some things, maybe didn't go how I planned, but I know I learned something, and my body feels different now, and I have more spaciousness within me. So there's an idea of the microcosm that I think comes into the workshops that I lead. It'll also be there in retreats that I lead, like the one I'm hosting in Thailand in March. I'll post more info about that later if you haven't heard about it. But so for instance, in a 3-hour workshop, the way that I like to guide that is to start on the embodied level. So because when we arrive at a workshop, there's a little bit of nervousness. We're not sure who else is going to be there. We're not sure exactly what we're going to do. And so there's a nervousness. People are kind of stuck in their heads a little bit. All the to-do lists and the worries from the day before and even the week before are kind of there in the atmosphere. It's almost tangible to me as a little bit of anxiety. And so to start, I love to start with a grounding, embodied exercise, and so I'll if it's a cacao ceremony, then we'll have an intention and we'll drink the cacao. If it's not a cacao ceremony, then I'll just guide everybody to stand up and to move around the room, to allow themselves to feel pulled to a spot in the room without needing to explain it exactly, without needing to have a rational idea of why they're there, but to go to a spot in the room where they feel comfortable. And then I'll usually lead a brief shaking meditation that comes essentially from the Osho therapy tradition, or Osho active meditations. Osho developed a meditation called the Kundalini meditation, which is not related to Kundalini yoga, if you've heard of that, but it's related to bioenergetics exercises. They call it the grounding exercise in bioenergetics. So yeah, feet are about shoulder width apart, the knees and hips are loose and relaxed, and I feel like doing it right now. I'm just gonna do it. Spontaneity. So eyes closed, arms hang loose and relaxed at the sides, and I invite people to just start shaking. And at first it's kind of like we're making it happen. There's a little bit of a rigidity, but then as it goes on, it becomes more spontaneous, and like each moment there's a letting go of control, and the large muscles in the legs almost start to quiver. I invite people to imagine that weight is falling off for their shoulders. At the beginning, at the beginning of a journey, I also have people focus on their breath and identify if they're bringing in any tension with them into the space, any tightness in their shoulders or their face or their neck. These things are very common. Even those of us who have a yoga or meditation practice, it's just so common in our fast-paced culture to develop pockets of tension, or to go about our days with the feeling that we're carrying around weight that we really don't need to be carrying. So starting out with that kind of grounding exercise gets everyone out of their heads. It's like our minds can take a little vacation, and we're getting into the realm of the body, which if you have explored spirituality at all, or even if you've explored the world of psychology, of depth psychology, you may be familiar with the idea of the subconscious, the idea that there's some part of us in our minds or our psyche that we're not really aware of, that we're not really in touch with. Maybe if, for instance, if somebody asks, who are you? Certain things would come out, and that's what we identify with. That's how we see ourselves. And then there's other parts of us that just wouldn't come out in the response to that question. So that's one way to think about the subconscious, that there are processes, that there are patterns, that there are things inside of us that we're not fully aware of at all times. So anyway, my point is that when we get into the body, when we drop in like that through a grounding exercise, then in a way we are dropping into the subconscious. I think that, in other words, the subconscious lives in the body in a way that is not very often recognized. And just like our beliefs live in our body, and our past experiences live in our body, scary situations, traumas that we've gone through live in our body. So I think it's important in an exploration of spiritual practice, in getting into a transformative journey that has this aspect of exploration, to gently go into the realm of the body, to do some shaking. And then I'll often lead breath work. I really love working with Osho's chakra breathing meditation, which is a standing breath work where you imagine sending the breath into different parts of the body. I won't demonstrate that one right now, but that's another one that gets into the subconscious through the body, really, because breathing into the deep lower belly is something that most of us in the Western world, at least, don't do on a regular basis. So it can be pretty uncomfortable. It can bring up fears. It can bring up repressed emotions. It can, and also getting the more oxygen can feel all that more oxygen, we can start to feel lightheaded, just like a lot's happening, and we're not quite sure what's going on. The mind starts to experience fear, to say the least. So at this point, we're really just with this little bit of shaking and over oxygenation. Suddenly, after like 20 minutes, we can be pretty deep in an exploration of territory that can be very new to a lot of people, but it is very safe. I pay a lot of attention to safety, and there's something about, for instance, there are breathwork practices where people are lying down with their eyes closed the whole time, breathing for a very, very long time, and people can go into far off realms, into imaginary realities, into dream worlds. And there's something different about this kind of breathing practice where somebody is standing up, we're holding ourselves up. So even if we are feeling a little bit lightheaded, I always remind people, if it gets a little bit intense, just to focus on your connection with the ground, feel your feet touching, touching the ground, or imagine yourself supported by the earth. And so this is a safe way to get into this kind of exploration, basically. From that point, when the body is activated and grounded, then I like to invite people into some movement. I don't call it dancing because a lot of us in our culture, that can be kind of a loaded word, even dancing, because there's the perception of performance and being watched, and a lot of people like myself a long time ago, I only danced if I was drinking. So then when I stopped, when I started drinking less, and then when I stopped drinking completely, learning to dance and move and feel free in movement was a process in itself that has been very, very transformational. But essentially, all that I've been talking about so far with the experience of exploration in a workshop context has been about getting into the body and letting the body lead. So I also love to invite people to breathe deep into their core, and even take slow steps around the room. And with each step, breathe and notice what that step was like. Notice what associations might come to mind. Notice what situations they might think of that they're going through in the outside world. And even something that simple, in other words, it's like a microcosm of how we explore in the bigger context of our lives, to start to trust our intuition more, and trust that each step of the journey has meaning is really important. So in a workshop setting, this is like a movement meditation, a way to get to know our impulses better, get to know what is pulling us through life one step at a time, to then trust that and put it to use for us. Because so for instance, I've met people who are spiritual seekers who will just jump into workshops and seminars and retreats for years and years. So they'll work with shamans or who knows, across the board, anything you can imagine. And yet I see them a couple years down the line, and it just seems like nothing has changed in their lives. They still seem like they're struggling with the same things, or they still have the same sense of something lacking or missing. It's kind of the idea of a lost soul, really. And it's so to me, one of the things that this comes down to, one of the ways this can happen is if there's not that continual reflection and checking in with the core and being totally honest with ourselves about okay, what did I learn from that specific practice? What change do I need to make in my life? What is still not healed, maybe, from the past? Because that's a big one. A lot of so the term spiritual bypassing is kind of a catchphrase right now in new age circles, so I'm really hesitant to use that term too much. But the basic idea of it is, if somebody takes on the appearance of having some spiritual accomplishments, or takes on the appearance of having gotten to a point of self-development where they have done a lot of healing, where they know a lot more about their purpose and the meaning of their life. So it's possible to fake that. Basically, it's possible to wear spiritual clothes and repeat spiritual, texts or quotes, but still have a lot of confusion or lostness, or just not really have a clear sense of what that person's, or of what so it's possible for a person to fake it, to put on the appearance of. So this is what's meant essentially by spiritual bypassing. The trouble is that for it to be the trouble is that to say that somebody is spiritual bypassing, it's a little bit like pointing the finger, that thing where we don't actually know what somebody's internal experience is. We don't know what they've gone through in their life. We don't know what they've already done to try to learn more about themselves and the purpose of their life. So a lot of times a term like that, for instance, if I were to say that I think somebody's doing spiritual bypassing, then that could actually just be me projecting that I see something in that person that is really just a way of avoiding looking at myself. So it's a very messy, very messy topic. What I was talking about is that idea, more of an idea of lost souls. Just in other words, the importance, I think, not just to be continually looking inside, but to be cultivating that relationship with our own intuition, and doing that through the body, not just through the idea of intuition or looking for signs from the universe. It's like, how about we look at the signs that are coming through our body and keep it really down to earth and practical. Yeah. I laugh because there's a lot of silly stuff in the world. It's important to keep a sense of humor, and I guess another thing, maybe part of why I'm laughing is that part of this thing about exploration to me is to not get stuck in one way of viewing things, to not cling to stubbornly to any belief or opinion especially about spirituality and spiritual practice, because I know what my experiences have been. I know what has worked for me and what hasn't worked for me, especially as years go by. It's easier for me to look back at 5 years ago and know for sure, like, wow, that really didn't help me at all. or to look back and say, oh yeah, there was something that I got out of that. But where I'm at right now, I feel very, very tuned in with my purpose of guiding people towards a lighter, freer way of being, of helping people walk towards their wholeness, to walk more towards empowerment, fulfillment, liberation, all of these kind of things. And I have very strong opinions about good, like, effective and safe ways of doing that, of guiding people through a transformational process. And also, I keep in mind that my opinions are absolutely going to change as time goes on. So this is a tricky time that we're in, I think, because I may have said in one of my earlier videos in this series that I think any system taken 100% can lead to insanity. I think I may have said that at the beginning of this video, actually. So any system taken 100% without question can lead to insanity, even if it's like a really seemingly practical system about communication, for instance. If it's just so common for things to become rigid and formulaic, and for the insider terminology to appear, and suddenly then the point of becoming a more fully functioning person who's in touch with their purpose and the meaning of their life, and able to navigate whatever situation life puts in their path. That all of that can get lost if it seems like one system is the only way, essentially. So I want to cut off in a couple minutes. The last thing on the topic of exploration that I wanted to share about has to do with travel. So this is kind of a very literal aspect of the importance of exploration. If you haven't heard the term transformational travel, I recommend that you check out New Mundo. That's here, I'll put the link in the comments. Yeah, so New Mundo is a network of what they call impact centers, eco-villages, intentional communities, permaculture centers around the world. I think their focus may be Central and Latin America and North America too now. But so about 2 years ago, yeah, just over like 2.5 years ago, I started to embark on a series of transformational travel journeys, solo traveling around the world. And I was so scared to do it, but this is something that I have been wanting to do for at least 10 years, really. I always imagined with fear, going to backpack in Europe by myself, or going to backpack around South America, or I don't know where else where else I first thought about doing that. But then there was just a voice in me that said, no, that's impossible. I would never be able to do that. And finally, fast forward to early 2015, and something switched in me, and I finally felt willing to face that fear. I talked a little bit about in the determination video about the importance of facing fears that our intuition tells us are getting in the way of our next step of empowerment and liberation. So first stop for me was to go to Spain and walk 410 miles on the Camino de Santiago, the walking pilgrimage that runs, well, there are trails all over Europe, but most people walk across the country of Spain. So I went by myself. I was walking a lot of the time by myself. You encounter other pilgrims, as they're called, on the path, but I went with the intention of spending a lot of time by myself out in the world, and finding myself in new, unusual situations, and just having to breathe through them and find my way through. And that kind of learning experience cannot be replicated in any other way. I really believe at this point that this aspect of actual world exploration is something completely unique. It's not the only way to experience this sort of exploration in the context of spiritual development, but there is something to be said. I think that a lot of people are starting to reawaken or awaken for the first time to this idea of transformational travel. So very quickly after that, I went to Central America for 4.5 months with very little plan. I just went down there and followed my intuition to cacao farms, and connected with a lot of international travelers in Guatemala and Nicaragua and Costa Rica. And in the middle of that trip, I went through a period of 3 or 4 weeks where I felt very lost. I was getting a lot of digestive sickness. I totally lost track of why I was down there. And yet I stuck it out. And once I got through that, it turned out that period of feeling a little bit lost and disoriented was probably the most important, well, it was one of the most important parts of the whole journey. In other words, to feel uncomfortable and in an unusual place, a foreigner in a foreign land, and just to learn to be okay with that was actually very important training. So to just skip ahead, I ended up back in Central America this last winter, and throughout these trips, I was also looking for more clarity about what would work for me in a living situation, and so through these, because I was also spending time at intentional communities, and so through this transformational travel, not only did I unwind and rewrite a lot of life patterns that were not helping me with relationships, with other aspects of social life, community. I also became a lot more confident in just my ability to navigate the world, to get around and do what I need to do. I found access to more allies and mentors, teachers who furthered my path of empowerment, getting more in touch with my voice, being able to speak my truth and do my work. And and then I lost my train of thought. So I've gotten a lot more clear then in the last 2.5 years about what really works for me, what works for my health, my body, my mind, the way that I feel most in touch with my power, most in touch with my passion, and my ability to share it, to live it. And so now I'm going to be setting up this is the integration in a way now, is that I'm going to be setting up a winter base in California, in Southern California, because the combination of having more access to intentional community, to nature, in a place that doesn't freeze in the winter, which just as a matter of, it's just simple fact that works better for my body. I'm able to do more and have a bigger impact in the world by doing that. And then also being in the US, I realized feels like a priority right now. I love traveling abroad. I love spending extended periods of time in other cultures and other countries, but there are resources in the U.S. Fast internet even makes a big difference. I work online. I consider myself a digital nomad, but I do need I need high-speed internet to be able to have a Skype call with somebody, to do a coaching call. So anyway, you get the idea. If the idea of transformational travel calls to you, first of all, check out the retreat that I'm hosting in Thailand for a week in March 2018. I'll post the link in the comments to that. It's happening March 17th to 24th on Koh Phangan. That's an amazing tropical island retreat destination in Thailand. So I've never been to that place. I feel a little bit nervous to go there. So I'm going to be doing it with you. I'm going to be going through my own life-changing journey. I'm also going to be I want to create eco-tourism and spiritual self-development experiences at cacao farms in Latin America. That's definitely coming up soon. And yeah, I can just see myself creating more opportunities to guide people through transformational travel, especially if it's your first time, if you really feel like a guide would be good in that way. However, there's something to be said about just going out there, going out on your own and doing the thing. Even if you start small, just go outside the comfort zone, and then really give yourself credit afterwards about the fact that you face some fear, and chances are you'll come out of it with some insights, some ideas about what you learned, what's different. And then there will also be, on the embodied level, a felt sense of what you went through. And that felt sense of what you learned, even if there aren't necessarily words for it, might be even more important, because it goes back to that thing about getting more in touch with the core intuition and leading from that. So this was a long one. I'm going to sign off. Thank you for watching. Feel free, if you're seeing this after the live video, feel free to post a comment in the question box, and I can answer it that way. There's also, if you go to bsfreespirituality.com, there's a contact page there if you have any questions about my coaching packages, the workshops that I lead in person, shorter ones, longer retreats, and online courses I'm going to be unveiling. So yeah, have a wonderful Wednesday. I'll be back the next few days to finish out this free video series. Adios.